Greetings everyone, welcome to episode 3 of our fall 2016 virtual office hours. My name is John Fia. I teach American history here at Messiah. Our producer of the office hours is Abby Blakeney. She's behind the camera as always. Today you notice we don't have the Pez dispensers, we have our George Washington bobblehead with us, and you'll see why here in a second. We are devoting the fall 2016 office hours to my course at Messiah College on the American Revolution. And we're just kind of walking you through some of the things that we've done in class. Hopefully some of these videos will actually help the students as well in the class to review for their exams and essays. But today we want to talk about one of the documents that we've been looking at, that we looked at actually this week. Again, I think I mentioned in the first episode, we're using Richard Brown and Ben Karp's Major Problems in the Era of the American Revolution, 1760 to 1791. And in this reader, they've included a great document from George Washington. It's a letter that George Washington writes to a man named William Crawford. It's September 1767. And we read this in the context of some other documents, specifically the so-called Proclamation Act of 1763, which creates this line, this proclamation line roughly running along the course of the Appalachian Mountains. And the King and Parliament, the British government says that, it's a bad idea to settle across that proclamation line in what was then described as the Indian Territory. So it's a way of sort of bringing order to the empire after the French and Indian War, in which they gained all of this land. It's also a way of kind of controlling the population and so that the British don't have to pay for military to defend the colonies if they were to move beyond that line. This letter from Washington, again, it's roughly 4 years after the passing of the 1763 proclamation. But in this letter to William Crawford, who I'm imagining, I haven't looked him up, but I'm imagining he's some type of a land agent, Washington is portrayed in this letter, or at least I'm portraying in this letter, as one of the chief violators of the proclamation of 1763. He writes to Crawford and asks Crawford to find him a tract of land anywhere between 15 and 2,000 acres, or actually more acres, somewhere beyond in western Pennsylvania for the most part. But the way Washington phrases his request is very interesting. He says at one point, it is possible, but I do not know that it is really the case, that Pennsylvania customs will not admit so large a quantity of land as I require to be entered together. If so, this may possibly be evaded by making several entries to the same amount, if the expense of doing this is not too heavy. So in other words, he's immediately trying to figure out ways in which he can obtain land beyond, to sort of skirt the system, in other words, and move beyond that proclamation line. He says, notwithstanding the proclamation that restrains it at present and prohibits the settling of them at all, for I can never look upon that proclamation in any other light, but this I say between ourselves, that as a temporary expedient to quiet the minds of the Indians, and must fall of course in a few years, especially when those Indians are consenting to our occupying the lands. In other words, Washington is saying, yes, this proclamation is in place, it's there to kind of control the Indians, but it's going to go away soon. And he almost implies as if, it doesn't matter if I, despite that fact that it's against the law to settle out there, if I can just get some land out there now, that this proclamation line, this law about settling in Indian country will soon go away. And then probably my favorite part of the document, Washington says, I would recommend it to you to keep this whole matter a profound secret, or trust it only with those in whom you can confide and who can assist you in bringing it to bear by their discoveries of land. And this advice proceeds from several very good reasons. And then he gives 2 reasons why he wants Crawford to keep this secret. First, he says he is worried about being censored by the government because of the king's proclamation. So he's worried, in other words, about getting in trouble for violating, crossing over and obtaining land beyond the 1763 line. But then he says this, and if the scheme I am now proposing to you was known, it might give the alarm to others by putting them upon a plan of the same nature before we could lay a proper foundation for success ourselves. Set the different interests a clashing, and very probably in the end overturn the whole, all which may be avoided by a silent management. And he goes on. In other words, Washington is saying, keep this quiet, because if other people find out that I'm violating the proclamation of 1763 by trying to obtain land in so-called Indian country, others might want to get in on this as well. And that would kind of threaten my opportunity to obtain large tracts of land for myself. So again, we see very much a different perspective here of George Washington, someone who's very land hungry, very self-interested, and as early as 1763, willing to go against the British government by trying to obtain land beyond the proclamation line. A fascinating document, gives a little bit of a glimpse into the character of Washington, but it also gives a glimpse into the kind of general weakness of that 1763 proclamation line. So we discussed this document and had some fun with it in class this week, and I hope you've enjoyed our discussion as well. We'll see you next time on the Virtual Office Hours.